Hey, thanks for coming back. This is not going to be a rant, but it will be a bit longer because I want to talk about the thinking around national concealed carry reciprocity and what that means and what the reality of that is going to be and the discussions. If you have any expectation that magically the House is going to pass it and the Senate is going to pass it and it's going to just show up on the president's desk, that's going to take longer than you think. And I'll explain why. The first thing is there is a misconception that that the reciprocity involved is the same as driver's licenses, and that is just not true. There is no federal mandate, there is no federal law requiring states to recognize each other's driver's license. That is something that they do for economic benefit. Imagine, for example, people that have a Washington, D.C. driver's license and live in Virginia or Maryland and can't drive there because their driver's license isn't recognized. So imagine that over 50 states. There is a vested interest in the states at the state level to have their citizens be able to drive on the interstate, for example, do interstate commerce, go from one state to the other. So the states themselves have agreed to that kind of reciprocity. Now, the federal government has come out and said your driver's license document must have certain features, and that's for identity and all those kind of things, and that's different than the law of having reciprocity. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that today 35 states-ish, actually 40, have some degree of reciprocity between themselves already, voluntarily, and that is done and negotiated annually between attorneys general. So there is reciprocity. It's just not everywhere. So let's talk about where it's not. It's not in those states and cities that drive those states, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, for example, that do not want guns, period, on the street. And if they do that, what happens? You've just violated states' rights, haven't you? Now, there is some way to leverage a state into accepting reciprocity. But I'm going to come back to that. But let's talk about the two things that you need to have reciprocity for concealed carry. First, and we're talking about handguns primarily, there's a difference between the permit to carry, and some people think you shouldn't have a permit at all. You know, that's an argument for a different time. I live in a state where we have permitless carry, which is not constitutional carry. It says residents of the state may, but not residents from another state. In Arizona, for example, it's constitutional carry. In Vermont, if you are a citizen, you can carry a gun, period. They don't care what state you're from, right? Now, if you commit a crime, guess what? You go to jail. That's how they look at it, and it's that simple. But there's a difference between the permit itself. Oh, and you want to carry that gun. Well, sucks to be you, because that gun is illegal in my state. So you can't carry that gun. And oh, by the way, federal law says you can't, if you're from out of state, you cannot buy a handgun in another state. So the catch-22 is you could have a permit to carry that's reciprocal, but if you go to a state like California or New York or New Jersey, California is the biggest one, where certain almost all firearms Massachusetts with the Glock, for example, and that is an illegal gun, you go to jail. So it has to be, I have a permit to carry concealed for the gun that I own. That is going to be a tough fight to get those two things married so you can do it. Now I really thought about this. What could be done to leverage misbehaving states, right? States that just don't want to do it. Well, you could say, the law could say to the state that if you issue concealed carry permits at all for whatever purpose, you must have reciprocity with any other state. So if you don't want to have reciprocity with any other state, you must discontinue and make illegal any existing concealed carry permits already issued in your state, regardless to whom they have been issued. So there goes all your politicians, law enforcement people when they're not on duty, all of that stuff gets killed off, and then you have an interesting fight inside that state. So that's one thing you could do, which would force them to have no concealed carry permits for anyone. And you say, okay. The second thing is you would have to say that if you are a state and you do not want to implement reciprocal concealed carry, then we, the federal government, will withhold all law enforcement funding for any grants or any reason to your state. We take all that money back. And there's precedent for doing that. The federal government does it all the time. They do it for education, they do it for infrastructure, they do it for a lot of different reasons. Oh, you don't want to follow our policy, national policy? Then we're not going to give you money to do those things in that area that you want to do. So you could leverage the money, and you could force a very unpleasant no concealed carry at all for your state. Because if you do it at all, you have to do it for everybody. Now let's talk about the firearm. You would have to say that you cannot ban a firearm that is legally owned by the person with the permit, right? And that would totally flame out Massachusetts, California, and they would come back and say, well, you can't do that. So we have a right to determine what kind of firearms we can have. And what kind of ammunition. Oh, by the way, you get to carry your ammunition into the state. So all of those kind of laws would get tangled up in their own underwear inside the state. Oh, you want federal money? You have to implement a federal policy in this area. Now, there is a misconception in some anti-gun people that because you get a non-resident concealed carry from your state, that, or in another state, that somehow it's mail order, that you had to go through no training, you had to go through no background check, no fingerprinting, none of that. That is absolutely not true anywhere. Anywhere. And I have non-resident permits from 4 states, and then a permit from my own. And it was not onerous to get. I did have to go through 5 background checks, count them 5, but I'm not a felon, so I don't care, right? And I can carry legally in 45 states with the combination of all the reciprocities. So in my view, all the national concealed carry reciprocity bill would do is for those states that already have some kind of reciprocity at all, it would say to them, okay, knock off this letters between all of the states' attorneys general. You guys don't have to do that anymore if you guys just agree that you will accept each other's thing. It would cut down a lot of work on their part because they got other things to do. But every July, each one of these states goes through the process. for the states that just don't want to do it, I don't believe that Congress could come up with a bill that would pass constitutional states' rights muster to force California, for example, to accept my state's concealed carry. I think that would result in a major Supreme Court battle, and how those things go, you don't know, because you don't know who's going to be on the court. I think that the basis for pushing a state to accept such reciprocity would be found in the Equal Protection Clause. It says, it is a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Twice the Supreme Court has said that's an individual right. Therefore, you pose a disproportionate burden. In other words, unequal protection for U.S. citizens in exercising their right. So it becomes a civil rights issue, which would immediately go to the Supreme Court, right? So that fight won't be over. But those are some thoughts that came to mind. Any comments or thoughts that you guys and ladies might have, I'd certainly welcome them. I'm not an attorney, but these are what came to mind to me, and then some of the research that I've done. So as always, thanks for watching. Carry on.